Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building.
Yes, indeed.
Jake Brennan. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Host of the Disgraceland podcast.
A Hollywood true crime story.
Music and true crime.
Music and true crime.
Now, let's talk about that a little bit. What is the Disgraceland podcast about?
It's music that delves into the careers and lives of musicians and music podcasts through the crimes they've committed or have had happen to them.
Ooh.
So there's a lot
Give me an
there.
example. That sounds interesting as fuck.
Well, the most recent one was on Whitney Houston. We all know that story, but there's been obscure ones too. The XXX-Tentacion story.
Mm-hmm.
Cardi B was another big one, but it delves into everything. Jerry Lee Lewis, Snoop Dogg, NWA. Gonna do one on Little Richard next season. So I try to look at the careers of these artists and tell the stories differently through the crimes.
So, like you mentioned Whitney Houston first. So, what did you describe with Whitney Houston? What did you look into with that one?
With Whitney, for me, the story was about she died of a broken heart. And there was all the drug use that happened during the later part of her career.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that was coming from a place internally of real heartbreak. And it ended her life too soon.
When you say brokenhearted, do you mean? I mean, I can't wait to listen. I'm already sold, by the way.
Yeah.
But when you say brokenhearted, do you mean like by a person, or just hurt because of things that have happened to her throughout her life in general?
I think she was a megawatt pop star who wasn't afforded the ability to be with the person she wanted to be, Robin Crawford, in her life. And I think part of her relationship with Bobby Brown, I think she loved Bobby on some level as well, but I think part of her relationship with Bobby was to almost like a distraction, you know? And I think ultimately, we're defined by the people we keep closest to us in a lot of ways. And, you know, I'm not putting her death or her demise onto Bobby Brown at all, but, you know, had she been in a healthy relationship, her life likely would have had a healthier end to it.
What was the crime she was guilty of? There's no.
Well, just, you know, smoking crack in front of your 5-year-old is kind of a crime.
Yeah.
So, where do you get this information from? Like, how do you find out? Are people interviewing with you guys, or are you getting police reports? How are you getting all this information?
It's a first-person narrative storytelling podcast. So I don't do interviews. I don't have people on air. I tell the stories myself in 30-minute blocks, and I do sound design around it. I get all the information. I'm not a journalist. I don't pretend to be. I get all the information from documentaries, biographies. Autobiographies are amazing. There's a chapter in my book on Chuck Berry that is sourced largely from what Chuck Berry himself wrote about himself, which is mind-blowing. So, yeah, that's where I get the information.
Some of these stories have been told so many times, though, so what's the new angle? Like, what's the new angle to Tupac? What's the new angle to Biggie?
Well, with Tupac and Biggie, that's a good one. My new angle on that was that there's culpability there from the media, and the media drove that story. They poured kerosene on that story. That West Coast East Coast beef was, there were tons and tons of media exposure just based on that rivalry. So that was the tactic I took. I was like, as the media has to look at themselves and how culpable they were in driving this forward.
I always wonder about stuff like that, though. I wonder, is it the media's fault? Or is the media just using the content that's out there? Because if Tupac's doing diss records to Biggie and they running into each other at award shows and it's conflict, the media's just kind of doing their job by reporting it, right?
Yeah, they're doing their job. It's not a binary black and white answer that we have to that. And those are the stories that are most interesting to me, the ones where it's gray, right? And I think those guys played into it for sure. I think in a lot of ways, Biggie thought it was more of a joke than Tupac did. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you're in this thing and the media is pouring gas on it and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it got out of their control. They couldn't control it anymore, and it ended the way it ended.
Now, do you have any problems with doing these episodes? Family members coming up to you, or anybody, friends coming up to you, threatening you, telling you to stop, or you haven't had any?
Not from family members. The feedback I've received from family members has been positive, largely. I did this episode on this guy, Spade Cooley, this old country artist who ended up murdering his wife. Brutal story. And his grandson got in touch with me, this 19-year-old kid, and was like, he's like, I didn't know my grandfather was such a badass. I was like, no, you're hearing this the wrong way, man, you know.
Jesus.
But yeah, brutal. I have heard from certain organizations large organizations who have the interests of some of these artists close to them, but I'm not going to get into it any further than that. Yeah.
But no threatening. You don't got to walk around with security. You good?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. At least when I came in here, I was. I don't know about after I leave.
When you do these stories, like what is your opinion on like stories that are already going on? Like, so for example, the Leaving Neverland, Michael Jackson, because you got to be careful with some of the narratives you paint, because you might be putting some false narratives on people that's on the ground.
I hear you. It's tougher with modern artists. Michael Jackson is, I'd love to tell that story, but in a lot of ways it hasn't been completely told. All the information isn't out there. Michael Jackson is really interesting to me because unlike all these other artists, Michael Jackson exists, culturally on this level that is beyond anyone else. I mean, this music is like woven into our upbringing. Like, how do you cancel Michael Jackson? Like, you can't.
He's dead.
He's dead, but how do you get rid of that music? You can't. It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's in your soul.
So, but I'll tell you, you're actually in the next episode that comes out next week.
Really?
Yeah.
That's the R. Kelly episode?
ASAP Rocky. And he came in.
Why would you say that? Why would I be in the R. Kelly episode?
Because you talk so negative about him and you don't listen to his music, so I just assumed that was it.
ASAP Rocky? What happened to ASAP Rocky?
Well, he had that dust up in Sweden, and then Trump freaked out on Twitter, and there was the whole thing that got him out. But he did that thing where he came on your show and you interviewed him, and he was getting some backlash for not speaking out against Trump. This is before that whole thing. Yeah. So there's a part of the story where I talk about that, and you guys figure into it.
Well, I don't mind stuff like that. I just always think it's weird when you're talking about people who are dead because we don't know what the truth is. Like, even with the whole Leaving Neverland thing, like, those guys at one point said Michael didn't do it, and then they came back and said he didn't. He did do it. Now they're doing a documentary, and it's like, why should they be credible?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about those guys, and I haven't seen the documentary, and I'm kind of waiting. Honestly, with Michael Jackson and R. Kelly, I think the story has not been completed yet, and I'm waiting for that to happen before I look into it. But with other artists, like with Cardi B, for example, I did an episode on Cardi B. She's on record saying she drugged and robbed men when she was dancing. So, for that, it's easy. It's like, she admitted it. You know what I mean? She's celebrated because of it. And it's kind of this badass portrayal of her as an artist and kind of doing what she needed to do on the way up to get where she got.
Interested. I think it's a double standard with that. Not on your part, but just in general.
Yeah.
Because Cardi's a woman. Guys talk about committing crimes all the time. And they get celebrated for their come-up stories. So that was just her lifestyle in the street. She was a stripper. That was, I guess, part of the lifestyle at one point. Not saying it's right, but neither is robbing somebody. Neither is shooting a gun at somebody. Neither is selling kilos of cocaine like all these guy rappers do.
Yeah.
I just think it's a double standard when people got mad at Cardi about that.
I agree. And the context of it is so important. And I try to give context to all of the artists in these stories, where they were at the time in their career, why they did it, what was motivating them. And it's interesting. The thing that I found is that for all of these artists, right, like the thing that makes them great musically and great as entertainers is often the same thing that happened to them in their formative years that drove them to commit the crimes. James Brown doesn't end up being the greatest entertainer of all time if he's not disciplined when he's 11 years old by being hung upside down in a burlap bag and beaten with a pool cue. Like that formative experience drove him to become the artist he was. It also drove him to become a psychopath in a lot of ways.
Yeah, man.
So they're connected to me. It's not black and white.
That's the wild thing about trauma, right? Like, you can use trauma to be the best version of yourself, but then you still got to deal with, if you don't deal with that trauma, you'll still be the worst part of yourself and end up redistributing that trauma.
Yeah.
I guess there's so many artists, you can do this forever. There's so many artists coming out with problems and situations. You can do this for a long time. How do you set who's your next artist? Who's the next?
I just need more white artists, bro. Like, I haven't seen enough white artists. Let's not act like white artists don't be out there committing all these goddamn crimes now.
Let's see. We got
Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain. We got coming up. We have
you do Elvis?
I did Elvis in the book. I just had a book come out.
You gotta do Elvis. Why does nobody want to touch Elvis?
Hey, man, I'm all over it. The thing's called Disgraceland, man. It's all about Elvis.
I need Elvis.
But yeah, I got a 2-part episode coming up on Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys. Who,
definitely white.
Definitely white. Rolling Stones. I'm about to do my 4th episode on the Rolling Stones.
Okay.
All right, white. Trying to think.
You shouldn't have to think so hard.
Snoop Dogg White?
No.
Black, man. Eminem?
I just did Eminem. I got a lot of crap for doing the Eminem because I said
Wow.
I wasn't a big fan of his music.
No.
But I do have tremendous respect from where he came from and how he actually took control of his life and became what he became. But yeah, man, there's more white artists than black artists for sure.
Good.
All right. Now, let me ask you a question, right? Since you do so many black artists, and we know you love black people
Yes.
because you're here. There's a thing that we're doing where we try to give back and help our community. So the first year we did, what did we do, Charlamagne?
We did an organization. Well, we do a thing here called Change for Change. Did you tell them that?
Mm-hmm.
And we did an organization called Gathering for Justice. That's Harry Belafonte's organization.
That's
we raised
right.
like 700-something thousand for them. Last year we did Project 357,
Correct.
which is it's Brandon Marshall's
Brandon
organization. It's what is it?
375.
375.
Right.
And they're here to eradicate the stigma of mental health in the community.
And this year we're doing Thurgood Marshall's College Fund, which helps with HBCUs. Students that want to go to HBCU, but they can't afford it. We help them out with scholarships, helping with books, lodging, and schooling. So we're just asking anybody if they could dig in their pocket and give a little bit, whatever they can, not to put any pressure on you. My guy over here, Charlamagne, who, he didn't go to college, but he decided that he wanted to give back. So last week, how much did you give? I can't remember.
$250,000.
$250,000. That's what he gave.
$250,000.
But not the pressure,
I'm not stacking it like Charlamagne,
no.
and I'm not a billionaire like the dude who was just in
Michael
here.
Rubin, he just gave $125,000.
All right. So I
More-
think on balance, can I kick in $1,000? Does that
There you
help?
take that,
go.
we'll take
that.
Everything
All right.
counts.
All right.
Everything counts.
Okay.
All right.
Size does not matter here.
That's right. Jake Brennan just said $1,000, and we're grateful and we're thankful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate
And we
it.
appreciate you for joining us.
Yeah, thanit. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, it's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.